Can you imagine a future where you can eat at McDonald's? And I know this might sound like a silly question coming from me, but stick with me, because in this episode we're going to talk a little bit about what's behind that question, what triggered it, and why I do believe that there could be a future where eating in McDonald's becomes feasible again. Welcome to the Primal Shift Podcast. We have to interrupt this episode for an important message from your feet. They've had enough of being crammed into traditional shoes. Regular shoes can wreck your back, joints, and overall foot health by squeezing your toes and disconnecting you from the ground. That's why I switched to Beluga minimalist shoes, and the difference has been incredible. These shoes give me a perfect, natural connection to the ground whether I'm walking, sprinting, or lifting heavy. My back pain disappeared, my athletic performance has improved dramatically, and they are comfortable enough to wear all day. Plus, my toes are finally pointing in the direction they're supposed to. Check them out at peluva.com and use code KUMMER for 15% off. That's peluva.com. And now back to the episode. I want to preface this with, last weekend we went up to our new property in preparation for our move. As you might have gathered by now, we're in the process of moving to a much larger property where we can raise more animals for food and implement even more of the things that we think are important for maintaining a healthy lifestyle, raising more of our own food, being more outside, being more connected to nature, all of those things. So we packed up the truck, we packed up the trailer with a chicken coop and one of the chicken coops with beehive equipment and a lot of other things to start moving gear, because we have so much stuff, it's not even funny. And it's kind of a nightmare moving all of that. But nonetheless, we packed everything up, we drove up there, and we left home a little late because we had later than expected breakfast. It took me a little bit longer to move everything on the trailer and the truck. But we finally made it. We were up there at noon. We met with the contractor, and then we drove to our barn to start unloading stuff and looking around and maybe seeing what we could potentially improve with the barn. And our goal was to be home by dinner. So there wasn't really any plan up front on what we would eat for dinner. Unfortunately, as we were checking out the barn, a thunderstorm rolled in and it started pouring. I have not seen and experienced as much downpour, as on that weekend. It was incredible. As if there was, gallons and gallons of water coming down, and we were cooped up in that barn for 1.5 hours. So that kind of put a dent in our entire timeline, because the drive home is about 1 hour and 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, with bad rain, with bad weather. And as the rain was letting up, the kids are like, "Hey, can we drive the truck?" And I'm like, well, why not? Let's take the opportunity and start with some driving lessons. They are 10 and 12 years old now, so I figured, that's a good age to start learning how to drive. So by the time they are ready for their driver's license, they already know how to drive. So we did this for half an hour or so, and then we finally started unloading, putting stuff in the trailer and heading back home. But on the way home, we had to stop at a buddy to pick up a even larger trailer so we can hold more stuff. And we were finally out of there by close to 6 p.m. And we were like, okay, what are we going to do for dinner? Coming home at 8 and then starting to cook is way too late, because it'll impact the sleep of everyone. I mean, the kids are typically in bed by the time already, or at least in the room, and we would go to bed at 9 p.m. as well. So way too close to bedtime. So I'm like, we have to stop somewhere. Where are we gonna stop? And I jokingly said to Kathy, can you imagine, if we were just the average, family and stop by at McDonald's drive-thru, no big deal, eat in the car, done with it in 10 minutes, and don't have to worry about dinner or food in the evening. And she said, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. And I'm like, well, but maybe at some point it will. I remembered that I saw a news clipping of McDonald's investing $200 million over the next couple of years in regenerative farming. I'm like, that is, a fast food restaurant or chain investing in regenerative agriculture. That is huge if you think about it. Because it means a couple of things, and I, before we get into this, I just, imagined for myself, what if, or imagine if, you could go to McDonald's and the beef was regeneratively raised, the fries were cooked in tallow instead of seed oils like back in the days, the sauces free of artificial chunk ingredients and more seed oils. And I'm like, all of it feels far off, but I don't think it's impossible. And I'm kind of latching on to those sentiments and thoughts because if you think about it, we are screwed. And one of the things that my wife tells me at least every other week or so is she comes to me and says, we're fucked. And I'm like, why? What is it? What did you learn now? Well, there are just so many discoveries that are absolutely mind-boggling. Like the other day, Kathy took the kids on a homeschooling trip. They went to the Chattahoochee Nature Reserve, I think it's called. And they learned about drinking water and aquatic life and all of the things that have to do kind of with water and water supply for us. And they learned that scientists discovered or found severe calcifications in frogs that are caused by impurities, endocrine disrupting chemicals in the water, heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, all that crap that ends up in the drinking water and that only partially that gets removed before we are offered that water again in our tap, causes health issues with frogs. And they also discovered ibuprofen, rising levels of ibuprofen in our drink water supply. That's local here, to our municipality, to our county. And she's like, we're so fucked. I mean, it's not entirely new because we obviously knew that drink water quality in the United States is horrible, but hearing it from those people who are actually at the forefront, who recommended to the group not to drink unfiltered tap water in most areas in the United States, including in our county, it's just sobering at the end of the day. And not too long ago, just to back this up with something that's not related to water, I took our youngest both the kids to Austria, and we watched a documentary. And for me, Europe is significantly in better shape, as I've discussed in the previous episode, as far as many health issues are concerned. Not in every case or in every area, but in many cases they do better with regulating or preventing chemicals and stuff in drink water supply, etc., etc. But they discovered airborne microplastics on top of mountains, like thousands of meters up, where the air is supposed to be pristine and water is supposed to be somewhat pristine. They discovered microplastics in the air that we inhale and then get into our bodies. And it was another of those moments where like, we're fucked. If the air on top of some of the highest mountains in Europe isn't pristine anymore, then what air is? There is none. And then, combined with water and clothing and all of the things that we're exposed to, you can sometimes feel like we're fucked. And it doesn't really matter what you do because there is no escaping this. But then hearing news like McDonald's investing in regenerative agriculture and Steak and Shake, just to mention a few of those brands that I heard from lately, switching to tallow instead of using seed oils. That means there is growing demand and businesses are responding. And that's a good thing because one of the key differences between Europe and the United States is, as far as I'm concerned, in Europe there are better regulations that come from the governing bodies where they say, okay, you cannot allow, red 40 as an artificial color in food, for example. But there is a much higher rate of compliance from the general population, meaning that those changes are not driven necessarily by the population. They are driven by policy. Here in the US, it's kind of the opposite because there are looser rules and businesses do whatever is most profitable and policy is very, very slow to respond. I mean, it's changing a little bit now, it appears like, but nonetheless, there is a lot of people who don't want to be compliant, who in a worst case scenario, refer to the Second Amendment and take up arms if their freedom and way of doing things of life is threatened. And so that's the difference between the United States and Europe. And so it's really refreshing to see that there is a lot of pushback from the general population here in the United States that causes businesses to respond and say, hey, people are demanding not to use seed oils in fried food. Well, let's see how we can figure out and use tallow. People are responding higher quality meat that takes animal welfare into account, that takes soil quality into account, that prevents the erosion of topsoil and all of those things that we get with conventional way of farming, both on the plant side as well as on the animal side. So I really like this. I think that's a positive sign. These are all small steps, but the tides may be shifting, I feel like. And that's I'm optimistic about this. And so my takeaway from all of this is, yes, we are still in an environment where a lot of the things are stacked against us, where we actively have to go out of our way to make the inconvenient decision, or to compromise in a way that would negatively impact our convenience for the sake of doing something that's healthier for us, like paying maybe a little bit more to get grass-fed, grass-finished meat instead of conventionally raised one, paying maybe a little bit more to get non-toxic clothing that's made of natural fibers instead of plastics, etc. But if you make small steps, if you do something better today than you did yesterday, you're making progress. And I think progress is important because it keeps us pushing as a whole, as a society, in the right direction. And one of the easiest ways for you to trigger or force businesses to make different decisions is to vote with your dollars, right? So it's up to you how you spend your money. If you go to Costco and buy the cheapest meat there is, then guess what? That's what Costco is going to sell because there is demand for it. But if you go there and say, hey, do you have grass-fed, grass-finished? And then buy that instead of the conventionally raised one, that's a signal for Costco, and I'm just picking out Costco as an example and meat as an example, that businesses will respond to. Ultimately, they wanna do what their customers demand at the end of the day. And so circling back to the big question, will we ever be able to eat at McDonald's? Maybe not tomorrow, but the possibility feels more real than ever. Now, to wrap this up and to let you know where did we end up eating, because no, we did not go to McDonald's, because as of today, I don't feel like that would be feasible and conducive to our health. But we did stop at a barbecue restaurant, and their chef decided to fry in tallow instead of seed oils. And so for me, that's like, okay, they're trying something because the chef believes that that's the healthier choice. And it's up to us consumers to confirm that decision, say, yes, I'm willing to pay maybe $1 extra for those fries because they're fried in tallow. And so that's what we did. We got brisket, we got some beef patties, we got some fries, and we enjoyed them. Is it the perfect food that we would have every day? Because I would argue, or at least I don't know that those fries were organic. They were certainly not completely peeled, so there's still the skin on it. Again, not perfect, but I think it was worth it for this in the context of our situation, and it was worth supporting that particular business because they decided to use tallow instead of cheap seed oils for their fries. All right, so with this we're gonna wrap it up. Shout out to Old Country Place in Canton, Georgia, for using tallow instead of seed oils. I much appreciate it. If you're watching this or listening to this on a platform that supports comments, let me know what you think. What's your take? Do you feel mostly hopeless, or do you have hope that we are heading in the right direction? I'd like to hear from you. If you don't watch this on a platform or listen to this on a platform that supports content, shoot me an email, mike@michaelkummer.com. Love to hear from you. Until next time.